From Independence Hall, on the campus of the National Guard Professional Education Center, this is the Leadership Minutes. Today's guest is Chief Warrant Officer 5 Teresa Domeier, the Command Chief Warrant Officer of the Army National Guard. I'm Sergeant First Class Jim Houston. And now your host, the Commander of the Professional Education Center, Colonel Leland Blanchard.
Okay, welcome to today's PEC podcast, where we explore some interesting topics and really endeavor to get after some leadership, some mentorship, and really provide you potentially insight with either senior leaders or interesting characters and personalities that are out there. Today, we're blessed to have a little bit of both. So we've got the 7th Command Chief of the Army National Guard, Teresa Domeier, and so we go back a little ways. So I say we have the opportunity. We're fortunate to have you with us today because you are both a senior leader and you're one of those interesting personalities that I really enjoy engaging and talking to, because you're not only an interesting leader. I think you're an interesting person, and so maybe we'll scratch a little bit about your past, that sordid past. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we'll make this easy. So start off, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you came from, traditional, tech. I mean, obviously I know a little bit about you, but tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us what you do as the Command Chief of the Army National Guard.
So I come from a big family of 5 girls and 5 boys. And
so basically your parents had a squad plus.
So what's interesting there is I'm the 7th child born on the 7th month and 7th day.
Oh, wow.
And now I'm the 7th Command Chief Warrant Officer.
Look at that. 7 is your lucky number.
It is my lucky
All
number.
right.
But I am blessed with a family that has supported me in anything I wanted to do. I decided to try the military, and I went to recruiting stations with the Army and the Marine Corps, and was not impressed just because, what the recruiter said to me back in 1982. Yeah. And so I heard about the National Guard, and I decided to go and talk to one of the recruiters, which was a Master Sergeant female. And I just told her, please tell me what basic training is going to be like. And so she told me, if you're going to keep your hair, they're going to try and make you cut it. They're going to do this and play all these games with me. And I'm like, well, I think I can take that. And and I was physically fit anyway, coming from the farm. And and I played sports all through high school.
Well, you said you were the 7th kid, so you were constantly competing for chow.
Yes, I was also doing that, but I also had to play football with my brothers because I was born after 4 boys, and then there was a boy born after me. Yeah. So, I was the tomboy. That's right. Nobody messed with me because if I couldn't take them down, my brothers would. That's just how it was when you grew up. Sure. And so I decided I was going to join the military, and my mom and dad were like, oh, you don't want to do that. So I had my brother and my friend Connie take me to the airport because I was not going to see someone cry me leaving. So actually my first plane ride was going into basic training, wow, South Carolina, which is really significant because Mr. Bish planned a trip for me to speak at a graduation in South Carolina on March 10th, and I never realized I was flying in on the 10th of March, wow, the same day I flew in 38 years ago. Wow. So that was awesome. It was pretty awesome to have that, and I'm like, it couldn't have ever been planned that well. I was really... Sure. I was excited, and when we got off the plane, what was there but a drill sergeant? And so I remembered all of that, and it brought back a lot of memories. And I wanted to find Tank Hill because I stayed in World War II barracks. Yeah, and they're gone. They knocked them all down.
There's a lot of people that are thankful for that, by the way.
But it was a great visit, and I was able to talk to young NCOs at the postal school. And they asked about how to become a warrant officer. So it was pretty cool. But I came back after basic training, and AIT went straight through 5 months at Fort Jackson. Mm-hmm. So I decided I wanted to try and work in the Guard. So by November of 1984, I became a technician. So I was a technician for 30 years. And so I totally understand the technician program. And then I actually was talked into applying to be the senior quartermaster warrant officer for the state. So I applied and I got it. Well then, so I was in a W-5 billet and I could get promoted. And they go, oh, you're in a W-5 billet. You can apply to be the command chief. And I'm like, I'm not applying to be the command chief. They're like, no, just put in for it. Show that you're interested. So I put in for it. So I actually was the quartermaster for 9 days, and then I became the state CCWO. Yeah. And but the military has been great to me. I truly love it. I love taking care of soldiers. I was always wanting to be in supply.
So I want to touch on, so you said two things that I think really stood out. And it's interesting because you said that you mentioned the support of your family and how important that was. But the other thing you mentioned was that first contact that you had with recruiters that, as you said, didn't impress you, right? I think that's so as leaders, I think sometimes we kind of gloss over how important that family support is in what we do, particularly in the Guard when we're talking about that dual mission that we have, right? And so taking members out of the very communities that they live in, when there's a disaster, they're stepping up, leaving their homes, leaving their families to serve the greater community. So that support of the family is vital, and certainly has played. You're now the 7th command chief of the Army National Guard. But you can't do that without the support of your family.
You can't.
And then I wonder how many people are out there that might have had the support of their family and that first contact with some leader, or maybe it's not even the first contact, but just that contact with somebody that kind of turned them off or maybe wasn't viewed as an opportunity. And so how is that?
So I had a brother, my older brother, Tim, also born on July 7th, but a different year. So okay. There's actually 3 of us in the family that are born on July 7th, but different years.
Expensive birthday.
No, they could share one cake,
okay.
So it wasn't good for me. But he was a drill sergeant in the Army Reserves. And, I would see him, but didn't think anything of it. And I had classmates that went through their junior year and didn't think a whole lot of that either. But, the support that my family gave me and then my husband, it is so, I think that's the number one. And truly, General McConville, General Jensen, they're always talking about good leaders. We need caring leaders. We do not need any toxic leaders. And it's so important to show that soldiers that we care about them. E1 to 4-star general, take the time to talk to them. Don't just walk by them and say, good morning, how are you? And just keep on walking. Because sometimes I do, and I feel bad about it. Take the time to stop and really ask them, how are you doing? How is your day?
Take a genuine interest. And so the other thing that I think, so when we talk about that support of our families and how quickly, it can erode if we're not doing the right things as leaders. So even expanding on that a little bit, when those families are at the armory or when there's an event, a function, leadership is not just about, hey, I'm going to take care of that soldier. It's about
taking an
interest in taking care of that family.
Yes.
And so,
yes, sir.
Because again, so you talk about all those years and so we know each other. I know that your husband you couldn't be doing what you're doing right now without his support.
100%. Right? 100%.
Because, he's making some made sacrifices along the way, and I believe retired police officer, right?
31 years as a police officer, and I would not taking this job as the command chief. I talked it over with him. Hey, if I get this job, are you going to go to DC with me? Yeah. And he point blank said, heck no. He was not going to go to DC with me, and he has yet to come see me. And it will be 3 years in July that I've been there. But I don't hold that against him. I mean, when I was in Nebraska, he took me to military balls. He came to dinners with me. But he comes from a family with a brother and a younger sister that his family was like 10 or 12 that we would do at the holidays.
Right.
Mine is 40 to 50. So that is a rude awakening coming from a small family. Let alone when you go to a military function, everybody.
That's right.
And so my husband's like, hey, you gonna leave me again and go talk to everybody? And I had lots of friends, general officers that would go up and talk to him, and he would communicate with them, but he would feel a little out of place. And I'm like, honey, you don't have to go there all the time. If you don't want to, I'm not going to make you go.
Now,
but I loved
awkward.
it.
Now, but think about how awkward it would have been for him and how painful it really would have been. So he was willing to do that because there's that atmosphere, right?
Yes.
Imagine if those leaders had not engaged with him and given him the opportunity. I mean, we forget about that stuff and the impact it has.
And it's important to include them. And so I always invited him. He even escorted one of my colonel friends and I to a Cav ball just because she was, going through a divorce. And so, he doesn't mind doing that. But, he made the comment, well, how would you like to go to a police party with me? And I go off with my friends, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I'll know everybody before I leave, because that's who I am.
That's who you are, right?
Because I love people. I love to try and help people. And so it's, leaders that want to take the time to actually make a difference. And I truly believe that's what we have now at NGP. And I think it's important for everybody to know that we have leaders that truly care. As I know you care. And that's how I connected with you right away, because I knew you were there to do a job, not just do a job. You were putting 110% into it. And I know I could count on you if I needed someone to talk to. And I truly appreciated you being there, because going to NGB from Nebraska is a little bit different, but you are one of those leaders.
No,
sir.
I appreciate that. I'll tell you. So I think for those who may be watching, some of them are out there wondering, where's that person for me? And so I always tell them, so I was fortunate. I'll never forget, and I've shared this before, but one of the most powerful moments for me as a junior leader was when I had a very toxic leader. And I had a senior NCO, I was a sergeant at the time, come up to me and say, Sergeant Blanchard, you don't know how fortunate you are. I was like, fortunate? He said, you have a leader that you are learning a lot from. And Sergeant, what are you smoking? Right? and he told me, for the rest of your career, when you come to a tough decision or a hard choice, ask yourself, what would this guy do? And then what not to do for the rest of your career. Right? So I always tell people, if you feel like they're not out there, one, take some notes on what not to do. Mm-hmm. But more than that, then when you get a chance to mentor, when you get a chance to make a difference, don't wait on someone else to do it, because you know what it felt like to be on the receiving end. And I think from your position, as you're out and about and talking with people, because a lot of times you're really addressing a lot of more senior people, but as you look at that maybe that junior NCO or that soldier that's thinking about, hey, do I want to stay in the Guard? Do I want to transition out? If I stay in, what do I want to do? And so as you look at that, again, talking about support from the family, talking about just good leaders and the impact, What insights or advice would you offer to people who are thinking, I'm at a crossroads, what should I do? And why should they consider becoming a warrant officer potentially?
So, and I have mentored several NCOs, and I tell them, if you want to make a difference in that career field and you still want to work with the NCOs, the warrant officer is the best place to be.
Yeah.
Because you can make an impact on training or changing stuff and working with the NCOs, but advising the officers and giving them courses of action so they know that you're the technical expert and that you have their back. I preach to my junior warrant officers, my W1s and W2s, when you go to that unit after you've completed your basic course and you know that job, you need to partner up with the lieutenants and the captains, truly the ones that are traditional, because the full-time people sometimes had a bad habit of saying, ma'am, sir, I've got this. You just go sit over there. You don't do that. You include everybody on your team, because that E3, E4, they can bring some important information and experience to the table.
And experience not just because they have, maybe they're a Sergeant E5, in uniform. They may also be a captain of a police district, right, or a precinct, or they may be a vice principal, and they're dealing with a lot of those challenges that we see with that age group, right? So I think leveraging those capabilities it's if you're not finding what fits you right in that moment, it's not, change things up a little bit. But I think going warrant is a fantastic, particularly if I got some leadership skills. It's a different role that I know as an O, having that insight. Again, I've bounced things off of you over the last few years. Having that insight coming from a different perspective, that's pretty powerful. So you can really change things. So
when I was an E5 and started as a technician, I had a W4 that I worked with, and he was truly a traditional W4 food service warrant, and I did everything during the week for him because he approved menu changes, approved whatever the meals were, and so I got really good at that. And so watching him and then going to the field with him once in a while, I'm like, that's not too bad. And so he retired, and
opportunity.
Yep. He retired, and I had been doing food service for almost 10 years, 11 years. But I had a supply MOS because I was a 76 Yankee, 92 Yankee. And I started off as a 71 Lima. I have 4 different MOSs. And that's one thing. I even talked to Sergeant Major of the Army. I said, do your drill sergeants really tell their soldiers that they can only have one MOS? Because that's wrong. And so that is the biggest thing. When there's opportunity to mentor some of these young kids, that you need to take that time. I was getting on a plane going home a couple months ago, and I saw some soldiers in uniform, and I said hi to them, and I wasn't in uniform, so I just kind of sat there, and they called active duty, and I got up and went up and walked in front of them, and then they got on after me, and he says, excuse me, ma'am, I noticed you flashed your ID, and I'm like, oh no, and I'm like, yeah, I did. And he goes, can I ask you what rank you are? And I said, I'm a CW5. Oh, I am so sorry to bother you. And I mean, it was like he thought I didn't have time for him.
Yeah. When in actuality, the purpose of our work, the focus of our work as leaders is the soldier.
Yes. And so I told him, he had gotten on the plane early. I'm like, sit down beside me. And so he sat by me.
Well, you scared that young soldier.
So so he knew I was a warrant officer, and we talked about all sorts of things, and he wanted to know about becoming a warrant officer, and I was telling him the different opportunities, and it's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to be an aviator, or do you want to be a targeting warrant? And so he was coming back from Fort Leonard Wood, and he said, ma'am, my drill sergeants lied to me because they told me he could only have one MOS. And I'm like, no. And if you pass the flight physicals and everything, you can be an aviator, and so, but what was so funny, because he had two other friends that were in the back of the plane, they get off ahead of me, and I go to the restroom. I come down to get my luggage, and these three kids are all around each other, and they're saying, oh, yeah, I talked to this warrant officer, and so they see me coming down. There she is, and I'm like, hi, how you doing? And the one perks up, and he goes, what kind of plane do you fly? So I kind of had to laugh and say, there's more than just aviators in the warrant officer cohort. That's right. And so I had to explain to him there's 17 branches, and so it was kind of funny, but
so I got to tell you, every time I get on a plane like that and someone says, hey, what rank are you? I always turn to look at them and say, well, what rank do you think I am? And I kind of look at them, and I get that look of confusion that I'm just messing with you. I'm a colonel. And then they,
yeah.
But I tell you, you think about every young soldier, whether it's discipline, whether it's hope and dreams, when they leave basic training, when they leave AIT, everything is possible. Mm-hmm. You find very few young men and women who decide to do this, who kind of get out of AIT thinking, well, I'm really limited. What impacts them is when other people put limitations on them, or when they kind of usurp that dream, or kind of, right? And so that, again, that leadership, that first contact, that opportunity, it's so powerful, because the first drill weekend, everybody's standing at, right? That private is standing at parade rest. Why? Because that's what the Army standard is. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing to me when I see that same soldier 6 months later not doing those things, and then we'll pretend it was him or her. No, it was the leadership that allowed that to happen. When that soldier gets out 4 or 5 years later because they're disenchanted, that's a failure of leadership, in my opinion.
I think so, and what really bothered me, even in the state, and when I go out to visit possible candidates and see them in the armory floor on their phones. Yeah. That really is discouraging, because they should be part of a team trying to figure something out, or working maintenance,
It's what they joined to do.
Right.
It's what they want to do.
Yes. You don't want them sitting on the floor because they're bored, and that's why they get out.
That's right.
And leaders have to recognize that, instead of go shut themselves in their office. The good leaders, they'll get out and see that. How can we improve? What mentorship can we bring to the table to help them?
A little planning, so that when you show up on drill weekend, you're moving, right? And you're constantly just moving from thing to thing. And I always say it's better to have soldiers going, wow, can we get like 5 minutes? As opposed to what you just described. Yep. Well, I guess I got another 20 minutes to play Candy Crush or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's not an endorsement. Right? But I'm telling you, that impact in so many ways that leaders can have. Let me ask you, talking about impact, one of the challenges that I have seen, particularly when we talk about recruiting warrants, because for most, minus I think it's just aviation, but for the rest of the 17 fields, I think they've got to have some time and some experience, right, in order to make that transition. About that time that everybody knows that is my go-to non-commissioned officer, that's when we're looking for them to make that transition. over to the Warrant Officer Corps. What would you say to those unit leaders who are reluctant to encourage that jump? Maybe they're concerned that if this soldier who's doing an outstanding job, and I can see them being a sergeant major or a first sergeant someday, if they leave my organization, I'm taking a hit, and they're probably going to end up somewhere else as a warrant officer. What would you say to them, or how would you define or describe a better approach?
So, I developed a great relationship in Nebraska with the sergeant major, the state sergeant major, just like with Sergeant Major Sampa. We team up, and we see soldiers. They're at the stop of because they can't go any higher in that unit as an E5 or E6, and there isn't very many promotion opportunities in whatever MOS that they're in. So you look at them and say, if you want to make a difference and you want to, move to wherever the warrant officer position is, then this is what you need to look for. Set goals for yourself. Yeah. And again, it's not always about the money. But, I also tell them.
My wife thinks it's a lot about the money.
But
I'm just kidding, baby. I love you. You know that, right?
But it's about being part of the team too, and trying to get these NCOs see that there's more opportunity out there for them, and some of them, because you have to have 6 years of experience when you apply for any branch except aviation. You can go as an E4, but that 6 years of experience, they may not have the highest rank that they could be is an E5, so they may not have their NCOERs. Right. But the proponents accept civilian leadership experience. They accept, experience in the job. If someone wanted to be a food service warrant and they ran a restaurant, or they did sanitation courses, whatever, if you can prove to them that you've got this experience and you've got a supervisor that will write a letter for you, that helps get it. So if you're like 4 years in your branch, or you're as an NCO in your MOS, and you want to be a quartermaster warrant, and you run the supply warehouse somewhere on the civilian sector, that will give you experience. Right. So these NCOs need to look at that too, because a lot of them don't know that.
Yeah, I think so. That's interesting, because leaders get so even the good ones, the great ones, they're so focused that I think we can probably do better organizationally of getting some of that word out. But there's only so much, and so again, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that the civilian experience. Now, I know you and I talked previously about some of the other military experience as an E4, whatever. But so that's a big deal, and I would encourage leaders who may be watching. You are strengthening your organization, and you're really helping those soldiers in their careers and ambitions. But that civilian experience piece, I'm going to take that back, and maybe that's something we need to start talking about in some of our courses here.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I think it's important, and to team up with the sergeant major too, because I always would say to the sergeant major in Nebraska, I'd go, not everybody's going to be a sergeant major. And right. You know what? If we can keep these young NCOs, E5s, E6s to make it to W4, because you can do it. If we can keep them in serving, because we are giving them more opportunities to do something they love, then let leaders need to get their NCOs to set goals. Not everybody's going to make it. I mean, candidate school is not easy. Right. It's still challenging. But candidate school, you can do it. We've got 26 states that have RTI WOCS programs, which is amazing. And we have 2 sites that they do phase 1, and then we have 2 sites for phase 2.
I remember a little bit about that.
Yeah, because you were part of our accelerated course, which made history. And the Army Reserves graduated the most candidates they have ever done their entire career. I think that was 65 or that they graduated. And they were so happy, and Mr. Griffin still talks about you because of your leadership.
Well, I appreciate
you were
that.
willing to do that.
So that's a good segue, because I wonder. So that was a challenge, right? And so that was kind of out there. And I remember you brought that, and we sat down with Mr. Griffin, and so we had that conversation. This was a challenge, and I think out of challenges is where we can find some opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So as the command chief, what do you see? I mean, are we still struggling at times, with some of the numbers, or what are the challenges you see? So that was a challenge we faced a couple of years ago. What do you see for challenges in the next couple of years, and what are those opportunities?
So the director, General Jensen, totally understands what the warrant officer brings to the table. And so, which is really refreshing, because he understands the technical warrant and the aviation, but he supports, because I told him my goal was to get to 90% filled, in the 54. I think everybody should be at 90%. He's like, okay, Chief, I want everybody at 95%. And I'm like, oh, and so
so you should have
he
said
challenged. So he challenges me,
Yeah.
because we were at 80.
That's leadership.
Yep, 82, 82.5 when I first got there, and we're at 87.5.
Awesome.
So, which is really good.
That's great.
But
That's a huge. So people don't realize, because at the same time, people are leaving. It's not just about getting more people on board, because people are. So you got to retain
Yep.
those quality folks, and particularly because you said something earlier about 6 years. So people are already a third of the way through their career when they go to school to become a warrant. So they've got 20. So again, as leaders, you gotta make it a climate and an environment where they want to stay.
So as leaders with, I see the challenges with, there's more. I had 12 years experience, 12 years in. We usually get NCOs that have already done 20 years. So what we're having a problem with now is that they can't get retention bonuses because they do the combined time in the service. And we're like, no, it needs to be the
Sure.
time as a warrant officer. So we're trying to change that, because
That'd be great.
for retention bonuses and trying to get them to stay in with PME, we changed it that you only needed the basic course to make it to W3. But then you needed the advanced course to make it to W4, but you also needed WILE and WSSE before you could make W5.
Right.
But that was a good, because we were trying to be equal with the active Army, and that's why we changed it to that. So that was a good one. But when I go to these like Fort Lee and talk to warrant officers, some are W1s in the basic course, and then I have follow-on W4s in there, or W5s. And boy, when they bring up stuff from their state and how they feel if they're full-time technicians, oh, I get my ears full. And then I come back and I tell the director, hey, sir. And he knows that we have challenges. Before, when I started back in 84, there was like a dozen people that would apply for a job. It's hard for states to get someone to take the mil tech, the technician, because the Guard wants readiness.
Right.
So as in being a military tech, wear the uniform every day, but they don't get TRICARE.
Sure.
And they can't get bonuses. I had to pay my bonus back to become a full-time tech.
Oh wow.
And so that's
talk about a disincentive.
Right. And so as leaders, we need to try and figure out what will make people want to serve as long as I have. You know, I absolutely love the Army and what the Army has done for me. But it wasn't given to me.
Sure.
And you have to work hard, and you've got to do your job well. You can't just have anything handed to you.
But talk about, so you talked about how we've risen up to 87%,
Yep.
right? And imagine what retention and recruiting will look like and transition over to the Warrant Officer Corps if we can get that bonus, if we can get some of these things. I mean, again, I appreciate you pointing that out, because that is a significant challenge. But at the same time, we can just flip that switch. That will be impactful and turn that challenge into an opportunity.
Which will be nice, because there are some states that are at 110%, 115%, not some of their warrant officers, but mainly even in recruiting. And so I like to challenge those generals, get your warrant officer cohort up to 100%. I have a top 10 report, and I think I have 12 states that are in the green. And then the majority are in amber, and then you have red. And so, like I tell my XO, Mr. Bish, we need to go visit these states.
Yeah. It's a leadership. That's
yeah.
a leadership quality.
Yes.
You got to go not where it's comfortable. Sometimes
right.
You got to go find where it's not so comfortable.
Exactly.
And have those tough conversations.
And we do. We meet with the tags. We meet, with their leadership and talk about possible how to recruit, more warrant officers.
It's interesting. I often get asked what makes a tremendous organization or high performing organization, and certainly it's the people, but it's funny how you really create that culture, and people come in again back to that new soldier who shows up. I'm supposed to stand in parade rest, or I'm supposed to be successful, or hey, we're open to those states. I imagine that many of those states that are in the green, as well as those that are in the red, were the same states that were in those positions just a few years ago, because they have an organizational culture and climate where it is either encouraged or not necessarily encouraged to make that transition. That's we won't say what those states' names are.
No, we will not.
But you know who you are. Well, we've been talking for a while, so I as we look to wrap this up, let me ask you this. This is one of my favorite questions to ask. All right. If you could go back and talk to yourself right around that about that 5-year mark, right, as a warrant officer, what would you tell yourself, or what advice would you either give yourself or do you wish would have been given? What do you think you would say, particularly, and I want to throw this out there, because you made a comment about when you talk to recruiters at the very beginning, we lived in a very different world. We had a very different culture, and being a female coming into uniform, honestly, it was just a different time. I'm glad we're where we are. I think we're better today for that diversity and that strength. What would you go back and tell yourself? That's always a trick question, right? So many things, particularly lottery numbers, comes up a lot. Invest in Amazon.
I had a lot of great mentorship.
Yeah.
I wish that, because I didn't have a lot of female mentorship when I was first in. Yeah. And you have to seek those relationships. And it's okay to have NCOs, warrant officers, 100%. Or O grades. I have all those mentorships. I did a lot of things on my own. I didn't want to burden anybody on stuff because I was full-time, but I put in a lot of hours like you. And truly to tell people you have to manage your personal life and your professional life. And being physically fit is not just because of being in the military. You should do it for your life. Yeah. And that's what, I had a friend that hated to run, and she could run, but when it was the PT test, she almost failed it, and you had to work with her, and she would call me every name in the book when I would pace her. But to try and get people motivated or to motivate themselves, I never had that problem on, wanting to do the best I could. Yeah. But you need to seek a little, set goals higher, because I never believed I would be a W-5. I would have been happy to retire as a W-4. But once I seen those opportunities, I wanted to take them. Yeah. And so I, telling myself I just needed to, education, and you need to do your PME, take your college courses, because I dove in to always supporting the military. And so now I'm like, well, I got all these college credits, but no degree yet. It's like, get out there and take the opportunity to get your degree. And I'm still going to use my GI Bill when I get out of the military.
Well, I'll tell you what, that is great advice to young soldiers at all levels. Mm-hmm. Whether you're officer, enlisted, warrant, you never know the opportunities that passed you up because you weren't ready. So jumping in, getting that PME done, right? So you said, well, once I hit W-4, but if you got to wait on all that PME now, maybe those opportunities in time pass. That's good advice.
Do not delay, and because it's important to listen to your mentorship, but also get out there and do your PME, and make sure that you take time to do your college courses too.
Biggest surprise of your career? Let me ask you that.
That I got this job. I knew you
were going to say that, by the way.
And, truly, because, competing for it, I knew 3/4 of the people, and any of them, I would have cheered them on, because that's what you should do. Oh, and warrant officers, that's lesson. One thing that warrant officers are good about, is we take care of each other. We don't try, and there might be, some that do it, but for the majority, we help each other, no matter what your branch that you are in, and we support each other. Sure. If we know that, there's a personnel warrant and you have to get your records right or get them straight, who you can call and contact. Or like I was food service, and if I wanted to create a SOP on something, I would call all my different food service warrants. And it's not because I was only one in the state.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I would have to go with all 54. Yeah. And you create, that, what do you want to say? The network. Yeah. Networking between all branches is very, very important. And I think that's where warrant officers, we're there to pat each other on the back. We're not competing for like your colonel or you being a GO. There's a lot of people that would cheer you on, and then there's other people that would make stuff up just to make you look bad.
Which is who you are.
Which is really, and it's terrible, because we shouldn't be that way, because we are family.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, absolutely. Well, I got to tell you, so I truly appreciate you taking some time today. So, you covered a lot of great things. You talked about mentorship. You talked about family support. You talked about a lot of the fundamentals of leadership. I mean, just even the networking piece and building relationships and knowing your peers, a lot of good stuff here today. So I really appreciate it. Just thank you so much for coming by and spending time with us today.
I truly appreciate your invitation, and I'm I'm not always happy to do things like this because sometimes it feels a little uncomfortable. But one thing that we need to get out to people, it's okay if you need help too. If you are having problems at home and you're thinking of hurting yourself, you're not weak. You are not weak if you reach out to get help. The Guard has had too many suicides. And I actually last year talked to a NCO that this state had just lost a master sergeant, and they were shocked because this guy was squared away, but he was caught in a bad thing, and so he was probably going to get divorced. And relationships, you should not end your life because a relationship's gone bad. And so it's important for people to know it's okay to reach out to get help. And so it's just a waste. But I talked to this young NCO, and he said, ma'am, about a year ago, I was that soldier. He goes, I was going to take my life. And I said, okay, what was it that made you stop and think? He says, I finally realized how it was going to affect my family, how it was going to affect the people that I loved. And then I thought, I need help. So he actually went and got help.
Great.
But
that's great.
I did have some states that they did reach out and get help for these individuals, and they were not going to let them become warrant officers. And I fought for them, and their packets have been approved.
That's great.
So you need to understand, you're not weak because you reach out like that. So people care.
Oh, 100%.
And the military has all sources to help you.
And I think that helping you in your leadership and helping push across the line those packets, that's a step towards getting rid of that stigma.
Yes.
That if I
Yes,
seek
sir.
help, that there's still going to be implications. And so we appreciate you doing that. And so I'll just tell the audience, and we often close with me telling you how important what you do for the nation and your communities is. So let me just end today by saying, you and your families, you are important. You are the purpose of our work. You are not bothering a leader. I'll just say this: if you're a leader who doesn't have time for your soldiers, you're not a leader, and B, you need to leave our formation. Now, I get it. I'm just a colonel somewhere, talking, but hit the door. You're important. Every soldier out there has value, great value. Let us know, reach out and let us know how we can help you. Appreciate what you do for our communities and our nation. Just hang in there, and God bless.